because you've traced back in history how the knowledge has been improving and increasing actually at a very high pace. So it would be very interesting to look at these particular periods and what has been researched over there to find the sort of gap between, you know, the linkage between private and...
Oh, I have.
Oh, you do? Okay.
But there's no time here to put
yes,
all that.
it just came to my mind that you can build a very...
It's very interesting. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I want to sincerely appreciate you for such outing. My question is this. The topic is very, very interesting and topical. But have you bothered to look at the relationship between the knowledge management, innovation? Of course, it grows from your research. Then how does this growth translate into the development of the society? Have you looked at that? Of course, there should be a synergy. Right. There should be a relationship. Because in some societies, knowledge grows, but it became counterproductive. So have you looked at the growth in knowledge and the productivity? Because it's expected that the output of such growth in knowledge should translate into economic, productivity, health-wise,
Actually,
I don't know if you got my question.
Yeah, no, I did. Actually, what the project that I did on my master's degree in engineering management was on knowledge management and productivity, and it was the case study was one of the companies that we have in Bahrain, and it was related completely where there was knowledge management and knowledge was growing, the productivity was growing.
Yeah, I think he's asking, yes. This is what I understood. He's looking for the social implications of the development of knowledge economy on the society. I understood this is what you want, yeah. So what was he suggesting? You put some section about social implication on knowledge economy.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Any other questions, please? Thank you so much, Ms. Marjan. Thank you. The next speaker, Dr. Wissam Samara. Dr. Wissam graduated from American University, moved to the University of Iowa, taught mathematics and statistics at the college level in the US, currently at Al-Quds Open University. Published a number of papers in academically reviewed journals, a reviewer for international relations and diplomacy journal. Please, Dr. Wissam, you have 10 minutes, and then 5 minutes for questions, please.
Okay, can I have the microphone? Yes, sure. Yeah. What's that? Yeah, I'm going to use, yeah, I just want to say I'm sorry about this, but what happened is my flash memory has somewhat, I think I have a virus on there, so I don't want to use it. Since we're small, I'll be able to cope without the projector. I hope you all don't mind.
You can.
What's that?
I can upload it for you.
Oh, no, it's like, I think it has a virus.
You think you're not sure?
Yeah, but
Give it to him.
I don't want to take a chance.
No.
Okay.
Give it to me.
Take a chance? Okay.
You carry
Okay.
on. You carry on with your...
Okay, so it's just
We'll deal with this,
the name. Okay, thank you. Okay, so today what I will talk about actually, the title of my paper is The Role of Entrepreneurship on the Growth and Development of the Palestinian Economy. Now, the reason I wrote this paper is the following. Now we're going to go back a little bit in history. I'm not going to bore you too much with the history, but we have to go back in history a little bit. In 1994, the Palestinian Authority was formed in 1994. And the purpose, when they formed the Palestinian Authority, of course I'm going to talk about the West Bank, right? The donor countries got together and they made this huge donations and fundings for... Yeah, that's it. Actually, oh, it's okay. No viruses, nothing. Oh, can he just roll it? Yeah, just, okay. Yeah, just roll it for, yeah, okay. Oh, how do I do that? Just press this, yeah, okay. Yeah, so what they did is the donor countries got together and they funded the state. They funded this newly established entity in order to break away from the Israeli economy, supposedly, because the Palestinian economy is very dependent on the Israeli economy. Now, 1994, that's what happened in 1994, right? Now, in the year 2017, what ended up happening? In the year 2017, the Palestinian economy still is heavily dependent on the Israeli economy. Nothing had changed. Actually, even what happened is we had an industrial sector, somewhat an industrial sector, when the Palestinian Authority took over from the Israeli authorities, right? And we had an agricultural sector. However, those two sectors, which are supposed to, especially the industrial sector, which is supposed to boost the economic process or the development of a country because of its linkages, the forward and backward linkages that it produces, ended up, instead of expanding, it ended up what? Going backwards, actually. So both the agricultural sector and the industrial sector contribution to the GDP, the percentage of their contribution to the GDP was very low. Actually, it even went backwards. Not even, we did not even maintain what we got, what we inherited, let's say, from the Israelis, right? Now, the thing is, in my paper, I did not want to start blaming Israel or blaming this and that, or say, we want to try and find a solution for the Palestinian economy to achieve a somewhat sustainable development, somewhat sustainable, because of due to the limitations of the circumstances, due to the limitations of from the occupation of the Israeli authorities. So we want to come up with a solution that can achieve a somewhat sustainable growth rate, and this somewhat sustainable growth rate, right, will help Palestinians to at least achieve a reasonable standard of living, right? And that's what I was trying to look out, without saying, oh, what if Israel gives the West Bank and Gaza and we get our own state, because that did not happen. Because supposedly we should have been in that stage and our economy should have been going. So that was the purpose of my paper. So, okay, we looked at, okay, so I was trying to look at how can we find a solution to this problem. Now, the solution lies, of course, in the nature of the Palestinian economy. The Palestinian economy operates through what? Through medium, small, and micro establishments. So the Palestinian economy did not operate in huge firms where you can experience economies of scale. Given the economies of scale, I can export, and then I can compete in the global market. No, it operated through, as I said, medium, small, and micro-sized establishments. So here was the key. Now, we all know that entrepreneurship is more apparent in these kind of establishments rather than in big manufacturers. And as we all know, now there's a trend moving towards more medium, small-sized establishments rather than huge. So why don't we take advantage of this situation? Now, of course, that was not only my idea. The Palestinian Authority in 2008 started putting this in their strategic plan, and in 2012 they initiated the Higher Excellence, Innovation Excellence Council to create incubators that can help out entrepreneurs. So I wanted to say, okay, is that a good solution? Is that a reasonable solution or not? Now, my paper is more like a little bit more technical, so I'm not going to bore you with the technicality, but let me go through it very quickly, right? What we did is, what first I did is I tried to come up with a simple model, right? A simple growth model. So I used the Cobb-Douglas production function. However, what ended up happening is when I put the variables and I put it in my model, the entrepreneurship variable had a negative impact on the GDP. Now, of course, the model had the problems because capital was not significant, so it did not make sense. So I automatically moved and took another approach. Now, the approach that I took is I took the time series analysis approach. Now, I took the two variables. The data was taken from the Palestinian Center Bureau of Statistics. It covered the period from 2000 to 2016. And I took the two variables, number of entrepreneurs in Palestine, right? And then the GDP. Now, I was not interested in the variables themselves. I'm interested in the growth rate, right? So what I did first in a time series analysis, the first thing I did was I used a unit root test, and I took the unit root test for the variables at the first difference. So for those two variables only, which is the entrepreneurship and the GDP. I took it at the first difference because I want to find the increase, the rate, the growth rate of those two variables. So at the first difference, my unit root test came out to the variables are stationary over time, so we can use it. There is somewhat stationarity in the variable, so I can move on to the next level. The next level was I used the co-integration test to see whether those two variables over the long run, they drift alongside, they drift together over the long run. How many? 2 minutes, okay, I'll finish up. And then, so the co-integration test resulted in, yes, those two variables do have a long-term pattern, right? So then I used the Granger causality test to see what variable is causing what. Now here was a surprise. The Granger causality test told me that the growth in the GDP is Granger causing the growth in the entrepreneurship. So it wasn't entrepreneurship causing the growth in the GDP, it was the other way around. So that was fine. So moved on to the final level. Since those two variables were co-integrated, I used the fully modified least square method to find the co-integration coefficient. Now here the coefficient is not relevant because the data is not that, it's from 2016. So I was looking at the sign of the coefficient, and the sign of the coefficient was positive. So that's good. So what does this mean? What does all this analysis means? All this analysis meant that as the Palestinian GDP grew, right, entrepreneurship, the number of entrepreneurs in Palestine also started to grow, right? So there was a positive relationship. Now, why did this happen? Why is it Granger causing this, the relationship with that direction? The explanation is the following. When the donor countries continue to pump money into the Palestinian economy, the Palestinian economy is growing through its service sector and construction sector, right? But the industrial and the agriculture sector did not grow. So what ended up happening is you have an increase in the GDP. When the Palestinian Authority had realized that the problem that we are gonna face when the donor countries cut the money and we stop giving us the money, the problem we're gonna face will not be solved by the public sector. You have to get the private sector to go into the process and try and achieve a somewhat sustainable development, right? This is when they started taking entrepreneurs, and since they created that council, the data from 2012 to 2016, the number of entrepreneurs was monotonically increasing.
Sir,
so
I have to stop you.
Okay, so I mean that's in short.
Any
sorry.
questions, please?
Yeah, please, I mean.
Yes, Doctor.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Doctor, for your presentation. I have two questions. First, how much GDP in Palestine 2016, and how much a contribution of each sector in this GDP? Because I think it is very important to make relationship between it and this title.
Okay, what was the first question? I'm sorry.
First question: how much is GDP in Palestine?
The Palestinian GDP. Okay. The real GDP, the real GDP of Palestine is approximately $12 billion. That's a rough estimate. In 2017, I think we reached 12 billion. But the data is not that accurate. But because we have some problems with the people who work in Israel, but according to our Center Bureau of Statistics, is around 12,000. Now the contribution of the agriculture sector, as I remember, I mean I did put it in my paper. I think it was like. The industrial sector was 8% contributing to the GDP. The agriculture sector was contributing to maybe, I think, 4% or 3%. But don't quote me too much, but it was roughly that. Now, in 1994, these two percentages were a lot higher.
Thank you. I don't think you will find very interesting results by just using a number of entrepreneurs in your country. I believe if you can decompose your GDP into percentages, such as percentage as a share, for instance, the industrial share as a percentage contributor to the GDP, and then you can run the Granger causality, and perhaps you will find either a unidirectional or bidirectional causality between the two. So numbers, we always try to avoid numbers. GDP is GDP per capita you're using, aren't you?
No, I was using GDP, not GDP per capita.
Yeah, we try to use GDP per capita.
There's a problem with that. That's why I did not use it, because our GDP per capita numbers are a lot different than the World Bank numbers. So I wasn't sure which one is right, so I said, let me stay away from it. That's why I did not use it. And the reason I did not do percentages of GDP like you have suggested is because actually I wrote a paper which was very detailed on the contribution of the industrial sector on our GDP. I already have a paper on that. So I should have actually referred to that paper. That's why I did not like go that much into details in that paper. That's
Dr. Wasim, thank you so much for the interesting actually title and the presentation. It is short, and although there is some parts which is you may need to work on them to make it more clearer, but it is a very important topic. My question, or just to enhance my understanding regarding to the entrepreneurship in Palestine, how about the supporting agency in Palestine, because I couldn't catch up your presentation where you are presenting. You never mentioned there is an agency or supporting to those entrepreneurs. Yes.
Yes, exactly. And they created it's very new. It was created in 2012, and they created a lot of incubators, and and they're pumping money into it. But the issue. So they did have that agency, but the problem we're having is, maybe because my presentation was a little bit short, the major problem we're going to have is, I don't know if this is rumors or not, but according to documents that we get, the support for us would stop in 2012 from all the donor countries. So if we continue at the same pace we're doing, and the support would stop in 2012, it's going to be a big problem. That's why they created this agency, but I think this agency should have been created a long time ago. Because I think it is doing somewhat of a good job, I would say. I want to say a good job. Yeah, but it was created in 2012.
I have a question, if
sure.
nobody is questioning, please, if you allow me. You mentioned something about the negative result you got for the variable of entrepreneurship, right?
Yeah, yes.
And then you moved from doing the regression, yes, into doing the time series.
Yeah, exactly.
How come regression couldn't find you
I'll tell you what happened. Actually, in my paper, I wrote it, but I didn't give it in my presentation. The negative result was, when the regression took a negative result, I went back and I looked at the data. And the problem was, and this is the problem where we have always in Palestine with the data, we have a problem, we have the second intifada had started in 2000, right? So the data from 2000 to 2003 is very bad. In all our data is very bad because we had the second intifada for 3 years, and then the effect of that second intifada in 3 years was, 3 years we had second intifada, and 2 years after spillover, right? And in 2006 we have the separation of...
You mean you have the wrong data?
No, I'll tell you, I'll get in the second. So, and then in 2006 we had the separation between Gaza and the West Bank, and there were also a political turmoil. So in those years, in the 5 years from 2000 to 2005, and then from 2006 to 2008, the number of entrepreneurs, instead of increasing, it was decreasing. And that's why you had all those 2 periods, the number of entrepreneurs are decreasing. At the same time, the GDP continued to increase, because remember, our GDP, the increase of our GDP is not due to our performance, it's due to donor countries.
Economic aid.
Yeah, economic aid, exactly.
Yes.
And that's why
I have to stop you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's why the regression was negative.
Now the stage is for our friend and colleague, Dr. Ramzi Nakhili. He's our dean.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Ramzi is the acting dean of the College of Administrative Sciences at ASU. His research interests lie in the areas of financial econometrics, financial markets, and risk management. He's a senior fellow of the HEA and a scholar in ecophysics. He previously worked with the Stimbis School of International Business and Entrepreneurship in Berlin, Germany, the University of Wollongong, Dubai, the European University College of Brussels, and Eastern Mediterranean University in Cyprus. Now he is with us. Please, you have 10 minutes, Dr. Ramzi.
Thank you very much.
And then we give you 5 minutes for question and answers.
I don't know. I mean, we've been listening to entrepreneurship management. I'm in finance. I don't know how I'm going to make you attracted to this particular topic. But very briefly, when I was asked to participate in this conference, I was asked to provide with a topic. So the topic was economic network and policy development. So I had to do a lot of search from my side, and what I come up with is the network between banking systems within the GCC countries. Now, why this topic is important? Well, I'm not going to go through my outline, but definitely, if I have some time, I will show you what's going on. Now, the recent financial crisis has triggered a lot of concern in the global system. Mainly a concern in the regulation of the banking system. In other words, they have realized that most of the banks globally, they are interconnected. So a failure in one banking system will lead to a cascade of failures in other banking systems. And definitely, this has also triggered what we call systemic risk. And systemic risk is very difficult to manage. And specifically for regulators like the Bank of International Settlement or the IMF, they urge people to measure and quantify this systemic risk, first of all, so that we can possibly see what are the measures that we can take so that we can manage this risk. So definitely later on, a lot of scholars have started to work on the measurement of these systematic risk, and most of them are using what we call a financial network approach. Let me just show you a network here. Now imagine, this is a very simple diagram, but it shows four banks, four systems, four central banks, for instance, okay? As you can see, they are interconnected with each other. So for instance, Bank 2 has a claim on, Bank 1 has a claim on Bank 2, Bank 2 has a claim on Bank 4, and then Bank 3 and 4, they have claims on each other. So imagine if one fails, for instance, number 2. If a system fails in number 2, then there will be a cascade of failures to the other banks, 1, 3, and 4. And this is what we call, this is a regulatory type of problem. So let me go back a little bit to what people have done before. In the literature, it's a very vast literature, but I will just focus on few things. Some people have looked at the transmission of shocks or the spillover of shocks, among different banks. And they have been doing it in the European countries as well as in Latin American countries, such as, for instance, Bravo Benitez. They did it in Colombia. The others, they did it in Leonel Perez in Mexico. Latin American countries are very vulnerable countries. They have a history before, back to the days when there was a major currency devaluation in those countries. But however, there are few studies in the Gulf countries. So that was my revelation. There's only one paper, and that's 2017. It's a very recent paper. And this paper has looked at the bank stability in the Gulf region. But they looked at it in a different way. They used, there are different two approaches. There's a market approach, okay? And there is what we call an accounting approach. So I looked at the accounting approach, and that's what we call balance sheet-based approach. And so it's a construction of network. So you see different claims, for example, such as this one. This is a sort of matrix. So you have different claims of different banks from other banks, okay? So if you take, for instance, any banking system, for example, in GCC countries, so it has a sum of claims from other central banks or from other GCC countries. Now, the good thing here is with this matrix we can do a lot. Okay, you can work a lot with this matrix. You can find eigenvalues, for example, or eigenvectors. But this is what I was trying to do. I was trying to look at two different types of shocks. As we call credit shocks and funding shocks. The credit shocks is simply when you look at the balance sheet, so there is a loss in the value of the asset. Okay, with those there's a value of assets, so you have it as a liability later on. And the funding shock is the withdrawal of funds from one banking system from another banking system. Now, if you look at it, this has happened when there is a credit shock or funding shock. A banking system may fail if its capital, that's big capital K, if the capital is becoming not enough, let's say, to sustain or to replenish what has been lost, whether it is in the from the credit shock perspective as well as from the funding perspective. Of course, there are certain parameters here in the sense that when you lose the value of your asset, you have to try to do what? You have to try to sell it. You have to try to increase its value, perhaps, if you can, and you have to pump up some liquids. So there is liquidity problem as well as risk problem. Now, the data, I looked at the GCC countries. It's unbelievably difficult to find the data. So that's why I put the source. It's from me first, the author. I have gone through each central bank system of the Gulf countries, and then I have collected enough data on the claims from one banking system of one country from another one. And but the Bank of International Settlement, they have already in their website a lot of data on cross-border claims. Okay, so a bit of here, a bit of that, but I was just working on one quarter, which is the recent quarter, 2017. And my study is based mostly on simulation, okay? Because of the lack of data, I have the capital, I have it because that's the sum of tier 1 capital, tier 2 capital. You find it in the balance sheet of a certain banking system or central bank. The other things, the other parameters, I had to run some simulations. But simulations based on, real facts coming from some macroeconomic indicators, for example, of these GCC countries. The GCC countries, between parentheses, they are very similar in their economies, okay? They're very similar in their system, even in their banking system. So I'm not deviating much from that reality. Now, just some numbers. So running simulation on credit shocks and on funding shocks. So on credit shocks, for example, how much is the percentage of loss if a credit shock is originated in Saudi Arabia? How much percentage of loss in the capital would happen in Kuwait, for instance, or Qatar, AE's United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Oman? So, by the way, the running simulation, that requires you to do it thousands and thousands of times, so they can have a little bit of convergence. Now, doing this and then running this for the funding shock would lead to some results such as this. I will come to the previous one. Now, credit shocks, if they originate from Saudi Arabia, they have a potential to cause failures in the banking system in most of the GCC countries. Maybe this is not true, but at least this is what my simulation has provided me. But during the first quarter of 2017, I don't know if I run this again, the second quarter of 2017, maybe the things will be different. And so banks headquartered in Saudi Arabia could be subject to what we call connected to fail risk, okay? Connected to fail risk from other GCC banks. The systemic risk shocks that originates in the banking system in Kuwait and Saudi Arabia appears to have effect in the banking system of Bahrain. And I think I'm right here because Bahrain is pretty much dependent on fundings from Saudi Arabia as well as fundings from Kuwait. The funding shocks that originate in the Saudi Arabian banking system, it may have a large and a big potential impact on whom? On the banking system in Bahrain, but my results revealed Qatar. Well, this is again Q1 2017. Let's not forget what has happened between. Yes, thank you very much. Let's not what happened between Qatar and the other GCC countries. The Omani banking system is the least exposed actually to the creditor funding shocks. So just to end up in a few seconds, I mean, this is just a preliminary, let's say, work. It has some limitations. My major concern is that those accounting, data, they are always, subject to controversy and reporting issues, as well as, of course, manipulation issues. And I believe I need to complement this with the market-based analysis. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ramzi. Really very interesting and stimulating paper. May I ask a question? Yeah. Is this the domino factor?
Sorry.
Can we call this the domino factor?
Yeah.
That what happens here happens in the other side of the GCC?
Yes. Only if you know the structure of the network.
Yeah.
By the way, this is the structure of the network in 2014, first quarter. The thicker the arc,
the more the relation.
Yes.
Yeah.
The thinner.
Yeah.
Okay. Is the.
How about inflation? Does it affect that kind of connections? Because you're talking about values.
No, not inflation. Central banks, banking generally, when you look at their balance sheets, their balance sheets has everything.
Yeah.
Okay. It has all the assets, whether they are valued or revalued.
Yeah.
By the way, valuing or revaluing, we use a discount rate, and that discount rate already incorporates the inflation rate.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions, colleagues? Yeah.
Thank you very much, Professor.
You're welcome.
You already preempted me with respect to accounting values and their instability sometimes with respect to measurement issues.
Yes.
Yeah, you talked about credit shock and funding shocks.
Yes.
Have you taken pains to probably look at the causes of shocks?
The causes of shocks? No.
Yes, to look at whether there can be moderating variables, with respect to your measurement. Because what causes, for instance, credit shock, and what are the causes of funding shock?
Yes, actually, for the funding shock, very simply, is the withdrawal of funds. So,
yes.
Let's say you have that scenario with Qatar, and you have funding withdrawal from other GCC banks.
Yeah, which means it has something to do with information.
Sorry?
It has something to do with information because I don't know if you looked at that, because people cannot just begin to make massive withdrawal if there is a repose of confidence in the financial institution. So you may have to look at that, For want of time, maybe we'll discuss that after now. Then you looked at capital. You look at capital generally. Did you look at the component of capital?
No,
is it equity capital?
No, it's tier
or debt capital?
No, it's tier 1 and tier 2 capital. Tier 1, okay, let me show you. Tier 1 capital, this is what in... you have the equity, permanent equity with disclosed reserves, and you include all the retained earnings. That's one. And the tier 2 capital, and that's where you have a lot of undisclosed actually reserves.
Okay. No.
General provisions, any losses. So this is what we do in monetary policies when we work on regulating the monetary system. A capital for a certain banking system is composed of 3 tiers in reality. But the most important tiers are tier 1 and tier 2. What's the difference between the two is if you see there are sometimes undisclosed reserves, okay? You find them in tier 2, but you don't find it in tier 1. The Bank of International Settlement has put a very important regulation in 2013. It's going to be fully implemented in 2019. What does it say? Which means that put more cushions, increase the buffer, okay? Increase your reserves. Do never go below 7% in here. for the tier 1 capital. Do never go below 10% for the tier 2 capital. So that's why these are the most important, actually, components of the capital pyramid.
Thank you very much.
Any volunteers?
It's not about volunteering.
Well, for combating. Thank you, Dr. Ramsey.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, colleagues. This is a great session. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, thank you.
So the session has already, completed. The whole presenter have already presented their papers. So you are welcome to have your break and coffee, please.